Sign the acknowledgement before you leave. The school has already documented what happened.
This report is false. You know what happened before I arrived.
And the record needs your signature.
My son was locked in a storage room. His hearing aid was smashed.
You are making this harder than it needs to be. Sign the acknowledgement or I will district today.
But the arrogant principal had no idea that from the dark corner of the hallway, the anonymous billionaire funding the school had quietly witnessed everything. And by tomorrow morning, one security camera recording would destroy the entire life of that smug principal. 2 days before the suspension notice was placed on the principal's desk, Malik sat alone in the far corner of the cafeteria at Westbridge Elementary School, where the tall windows looked out over a soccer field trimmed like a private park. The sound of trays, chairs scraping, and children fighting to tell weekend stories poured into the old hearing aid in his left ear as one twisted noise. Malik was used to it. He always chose the table near the trash can, not because he liked the smell of spilled milk, but because fewer people sat beside him there to ask why he didn't answer quickly. Malik's hearing aid had been taped back together by his mother with clear tape across the back case. Every morning, Elena smoothed the tape with her finger, checked the battery, and then bent down so he could read her lips. "Try your best today." Malik would nod, put on his backpack with one broken zipper, and walk into a school where everything looked cleaner than the apartment he shared with his mother. Clean did not mean safe. He had learned that from the side glances, the laughter hidden behind hands, and the way a few children pretended to wave their hands when he used ASL. His lunch was a hamburger sandwich bought with a meal assistance card, a small carton of milk, and a few carrot slices. Malik cut the sandwich into 2 very even pieces with the edge of the milk carton, and then ate the smaller piece first. He always saved the larger part for the end, as if reminding himself that something good was still waiting if he ate slowly enough. A few tables away, a blonde girl sat stiffly in front of a lunch tray she had not touched. Malik knew her name was Lily. She was in 2nd grade, and she spoke even less than he did, even though she could hear. That day, Lily stood and carried her tray to look for another seat. A group of children ran behind her and knocked her elbow out of place. The tray slipped from her hands, milk splashed across her sweater, and mashed potatoes fell onto the floor in a soft white smear. Lily stood in the middle of the cafeteria with her shoulders pulled in. The children around her burst out laughing. One boy copied the sound of milk spilling and pointed at her sweater. Lily raised her hands to her ears, her face turning bright red. The cafeteria monitor had her back turned, dealing with the line for water. Malik looked at the larger piece of sandwich left on his napkin. He touched his hearing aid, heard the laughter twist and echo, then stood up. He did not run. He walked slowly through the messy chairs, bent down, picked up the cleanest napkin from his tray, and broke the larger piece of sandwich in half. When he reached Lily, he did not speak. He only placed half the sandwich in her hand and signed slowly, "It's okay." Lily did not understand all of it, but she saw Malik's small smile and stopped covering her ears. He used the napkin to wipe a streak of milk from her hand, clumsy and careful. In the glass hallway of the 2nd floor, Nathaniel stood with Principal Harrison and 2 school board members. He had come to Westbridge to see the new computer room funded by his company's foundation. Harrison was talking about an elite learning environment, a commitment to inclusion, and how the school supported students with special needs. Nathaniel listened with a face that barely changed. He was used to polished presentations. Then he looked down into the cafeteria just as Malik gave Lily half of his sandwich. Lily was his daughter. At home, she often refused to eat if strangers sat too close and would not enter a crowded room unless she knew the exit first. Nathaniel had hired specialists, changed schools, and arranged private transportation. But there were still moments no amount of money could reach before a child's panic began. Yet a deaf boy sitting alone in the corner of the cafeteria had noticed what the adults in suits had missed. Nathaniel did not go downstairs. He only stopped the conversation, his eyes following Malik as the boy returned to his seat with the other half of his lunch. Thursday afternoon, light rain fell outside and the 3rd grade PE class was moved into the gym. The wooden floor shone, blue basketball lines crossed the court, and the smell of rubber and floor cleaner mixed with damp jackets. The PE teacher divided the students into groups to play with softballs. Malik stood near the end of the line, trying to read lips among children turning this way and that. His hearing aid sometimes let out a high squeal that made him wince. He gently adjusted it, afraid the tape on the back might come loose. Trent, Principal Harrison's son, stood on the other side of the line with 3 boys who usually followed him. Trent was only 9, but he already knew how to walk into a room as if everything inside it could be explained away by his father if needed. Since the start of the year, Trent had targeted Malik. Malik reacted slowly because he watched people's mouths when they spoke and because he could not fight back with words. When the teacher turned to get the bag of balls, Trent stepped up behind Malik. He snapped his fingers beside Malik's right ear. Malik did not react because that ear was barely heard. The boys following Trent giggled. Trent moved to the left ear, where the hearing aid sat under Malik's short hair. The sound hit the device and made Malik jerk. He turned around and raised his hand to sign stop. Trent puffed out his cheeks, waved his hands in fake messy signs, and then called him a dumb deaf mute. Malik took half a step back. He looked toward the teacher, but she was recording scores at the table on the other side, her back turned. Trent leaned closer, moving his mouth too slowly, mocking the way adults sometimes spoke to Malik. He asked if that trash machine helped Malik hear when people told him to get lost. Malik tightened his grip on the strap of his gym bag so his hands would have something to do instead of shaking. A ball rolled to Malik's feet. He bent down to pick it up. Trent snatched the hearing aid from his ear so quickly that the tape pulled painfully against his skin. Malik turned, his eyes wide. The world dropped in volume at once. It was not the gentle quiet of sleeping beside his mother. It was a thick emptiness. He saw Trent holding the device high. Malik reached out with both hands, signing quickly until his signs tangled. "Give it back, please." Trent threw the device onto the floor. The hearing aid bounced with a small snap. The plastic case cracked open, and the battery rolled under the folded chairs. Malik dropped to his knees to pick it up, but another boy kicked the battery farther away. Malik crawled after it, his hands touching dust and hair on the floor. When he finally grabbed the battery, Trent caught the back of his shirt and pulled him up. With no sound, Malik only saw moving faces, white teeth, and shoulders shaking with laughter. The equipment storage room was behind a metal door at the far end of the gym. It held practice balls, rolled mats, plastic cones, and old nets. Trent pushed Malik toward it and said something to his friends. Malik read a few words on his lips, "Let him hear the dark." Malik tried to pull away, but he was smaller and slower. Trent opened the door. The smell of old rubber and damp dust came out. One hard shove sent Malik falling inside, his knee hitting the concrete floor. The door slammed shut, the outside latch slid into place. In the dark, Malik lifted his hand to his empty ear. He called for his mother the way his mouth remembered, but he could not hear himself. Without the hearing aid, everything turned into movement without sound. He hit the door. Metal shook under his palms, but he did not know if the noise was loud enough. He hit it again faster this time, until his knuckles began to hurt. Every time he stopped, the darkness seemed to press closer to his face, and he hit harder. He tried to find the light switch. His hands brushed over rolled mats, net bags, and the sharp edge of a metal shelf. A ball fell and touched his foot, making him jump backward until his back hit the wall. He could not hear footsteps outside and did not know if anyone was walking past. Time was measured by how many times he slapped the door, how many broken breaths he took, and how many times he looked at the strip of light under the door without seeing anyone's shadow. Malik remembered his mother teaching him that when fear came, he should look for 5 things in front of him, touch 4 things around him, and breathe slowly. But in the dark room, he could only see dim shapes. He touched the cold floor, his painful knee, the broken plastic piece in his pocket, and the burning place behind his ear. On the 4th try, his hand touched something wet on the back of his other hand. He brought it close to his face and saw that his skin had scraped open from hitting the door. He could not cry out loud. His whole body shook, his mouth opening and closing in the dark. Outside, PE ended. Children poured into the hallway. Trent walked beside his friends, his face calm, adjusting the laces on his expensive shoes. When the teacher asked if anyone had seen Malik, Trent shrugged and said the boy had probably hidden because he did not want to play. The teacher frowned, but then she was called away to handle a student with a bloody nose. The final attendance check got lost among coats, backpacks, and the dismissal bell. One blank space on the list was marked with hurried words, "Left gym early." After 2 hours, a janitor named Raymond pushed his mop cart into the gym. He noticed the small battery under the folded chairs first and picked it up because he was afraid a student might swallow it. Near the storage room door, he stopped when he saw a strip of clear tape stuck to the tile floor. He opened the latch and pulled the door. The gym light poured in too brightly. Malik was curled in the corner between 2 mats, his knees pulled tight to his chest, both hands holding his left ear, as if he were trying to protect the last piece of his world. When Raymond touched his shoulder, Malik jerked hard and backed into the wall. Raymond called the school nurse immediately. Malik did not hear the call. He only saw the adults' faces become tense, saw them bend down, saw their mouths moving quickly. He searched for the hearing aid in his pocket and held out the cracked case with both hands. The nurse looked at the device, then at the scratches on his hands. She gave him paper to write on, but the pen slipped from his shaking fingers. Malik could only make one sign again and again, slow and broken. Mother. Elena was near the end of a long night shift at the Amazon packing warehouse when her phone buzzed inside her reflective vest. She had just labeled her 300th package. Her wrist ached from constant scanning. The school number appeared and her stomach tightened. The caller said Malik had been found in the gym area, that he was in the nurse's office, and that a parent needed to come right away. Elena did not wait to hear the rest. She asked her manager to leave early, was reminded that leaving would cost her attendance points, and still pulled off her gloves and ran into the rain toward the parking lot. She arrived at the school in a jacket that still smelled of damp cardboard boxes, her hair tied in a quick bun, her work shoes dusty from the warehouse. Malik sat on a chair in the nurse's office with a blanket around his shoulders. When he saw his mother, he jumped up but stopped halfway as if he were afraid he had done something wrong. Elena knelt in front of him, held his scratched hands, and looked at the red mark behind his ear where the device had been pulled off. Malik raised his hands and signed sorry. Elena shook her head immediately, pulled his face against her chest, and spoke slowly so he could read her lips. You did nothing wrong. The nurse's office door opened. An administrative assistant asked Elena to come to the principal's office. It was not a request. A path had already been prepared. Elena held Malik's coat in one arm and gripped his hand with the other, walking through a hallway where award boards hung in straight lines under white lights. On the wall was a slogan about kindness and safety for every student. Malik looked at the words but did not stop. He kept the broken hearing aid in his pocket, like evidence he did not yet know whether adults would allow to exist. Principal Harrison's office sat at the end of the hallway, wide and warm, with leather chairs and photos of him shaking hands with donors. Trent sat inside, one hand wearing a bandage over a small scratch. Another student's mother avoided looking at Elena. Harrison stood behind his desk, adjusted his cuff, and wore a sad smile placed exactly where it needed to be for a man about to say what had already been decided. On the desk in front of him was a stack of papers held by a metal clip. Elena looked at the first page and saw Malik's name. Harrison placed his palm on it like a judge holding a case file. He said he was very sorry about the unfortunate incident that day, but the school had to take uncontrolled behavior seriously. Elena had not had time to ask about the cameras or bring out the broken hearing aid before Harrison pushed the folder a few more inches toward her. At the bottom corner of the page, the words temporary suspension showed clearly under the desk lamp. She realized the room had already chosen roles for them. Trent was the child who needed protection, Harrison was the keeper of order, and Malik was only the problem that had to be written into a file before the afternoon bell finished cooling on the cold white paper. Malik stood close beside his mother, his eyes moving from the principal's face to the pen already placed beside the paper. And for the first time that day, Elena understood that the dark room was not the place where her son had been locked away the longest. Harrison did not stand when Elena walked in. He sat behind the walnut desk, leaning back in the leather chair, both hands resting on the folder as if everything had already been arranged. The room was warmer than the hallway, smelling of expensive coffee and furniture polish. Elena was still wearing the reflective jacket from the warehouse. The edge of her sleeve still had cardboard dust on it. She had not had time to wash the smell of packing plastic from her hands, had not had time to call her manager and ask to miss the rest of her shift, and had not had time to understand why her son had been found in a dark storage room with a broken hearing aid. Malik stood close to his mother's side, both hands holding the cracked device inside his pocket. Trent sat in the chair on the left, beside a woman wearing a cream cashmere sweater. On the back of his hand was a thin scratch covered with a brand new bandage. He did not look at Malik. He looked down at his white sneakers, rubbing the toe of one shoe against the carpet, wearing the face of a child who had been told that as long as he stayed quiet, the adults would fix the rest. Harrison pushed his glasses up. He called Elena's name in the voice of a man who had practiced talking to poor parents long enough to know when to sound soft and when to sound hard. He said the school was very sorry the incident had caused Malik to panic. He stressed the word panic and then opened the first page of the folder. According to him, Trent and two other students had only been trying to help Malik leave the gym after the boy had skipped the group activity. Malik had overreacted, swung his arm and scratched Trent, then dropped his own hearing aid while losing control. Elena looked at her son. Malik could catch a few pieces with his eyes, but not enough to understand everything. He only saw his name, Trent's name, and Harrison's finger pointing at the scratch on Trent's hand. Malik immediately shook his head. His hands flew up, signing fast and broken. Not true. Trent took the device in storage room and locked the door. Elena placed a hand on her son's wrist, not letting him sign until he shook. She turned back to Harrison and said slowly that she wanted an ASL interpreter before any statement was entered into the record. Harrison's smile did not disappear. It only became smaller. He said the district interpreter had to be scheduled in advance, and in an emergency, the school had the right to rely on the accounts of direct witnesses. Those children were not in the room, but their words had already been placed on the table before Elena arrived. Elena took the broken hearing aid from Malik's hand and placed it on the desk. A piece of clear tape still clung to the back case. The battery compartment had popped open, and the cracked plastic had turned white along the break. She said the device could not have fallen apart like that by itself, and Malik never removed it at school because he was afraid he would not keep up with class. Harrison glanced down very quickly, then pushed the device back with the tip of his pen as if it were something unclean. He said the device was old and had been temporarily repaired, so while the damage was unfortunate, it did not prove bullying. Elena breathed in through her nose. She had worked in a warehouse long enough to know the human body could keep standing when the feet hurt, when the back went numb, and when the mind had not slept after 12 hours of scanning codes. But standing in front of a man who turned her child's wounds into administrative language was a different kind of exhaustion. She asked about the hallway camera. She asked about the gym camera. She asked who had opened the storage room latch. Harrison tapped his finger on the folder and said, "Unfortunately, the camera near the equipment room has been under scheduled maintenance since yesterday afternoon." Elena looked up at the corner of the ceiling, where the small camera still showed a green light. Harrison followed her eyes, then explained that a power light did not mean the recording system was working. He added that the school could not let emotional assumptions damage the reputation of another student, especially when that student had also been injured. Malik touched his mother's hand. He didn't understand all of Harrison's words, but he understood that his mother was breathing differently. He took a sticky note from the side table and wrote in shaky letters, "I was locked in." Then he drew a door and a latch. Elena held the note up. Harrison looked at it for less than 2 seconds. He said children in a panic state often remembered details incorrectly, and with students who had special needs, the difference between fear and actual events needed to be assessed by trained adults. Elena understood what he was saying. She was the mother, but in this room, she did not count as trained. She was a night shift worker, a parent arriving late in a dirty jacket, and a black woman sitting in front of a principal whose photo had been on fundraising newsletters. If she raised her voice, she would become the angry parent. If she stayed quiet, her son's story would be rewritten in clean ink on school paper. Harrison pulled out the suspension notice. He placed it in front of Elena and turned the pen toward her. Malik would be suspended for 5 days for disruptive behavior, refusing to follow instructions and injuring another student. During that time, the school would review an individual behavior support plan. He softened his voice as he said Westbridge always prioritized minority students and disabled students, but inclusion could not mean lowering safety standards. Elena looked at the words injuring another student beside her son's name. Malik was the kind of child who apologized when he accidentally dropped another student's pencil. Malik cut his sandwich into 2 pieces so the last one would look bigger. Malik had given half of his lunch to a little girl shaking in the cafeteria, and now, in school paperwork, he was being treated as a dangerous child. She said she would not sign without the camera footage and an interpreter. Harrison leaned back in his chair. He did not raise his voice. He looked at Elena like she was making things harder for herself. He said if a parent refused to cooperate in a school safety case, the school would have to record that. He also had to consider whether the home environment was fully meeting Malik's support needs, especially since the boy's hearing aid had clearly been in poor condition for a long time. If necessary, he would consult Child Protective Services to make sure Malik was receiving proper care. Elena did not touch the pen, but her fingers stiffened on the edge of the chair. The threat did not need to be any clearer. She knew how quickly a poor mother's file could be opened when someone with a title made a call in a concerned voice. She knew her 1-bedroom apartment, her night shifts, the late electric bill, and the hearing aid patched with tape could all be arranged into proof that she was not enough. None of them would write in the file that she skipped meals to buy batteries for her son. None of them would write that she learned ASL through free videos after every shift. Malik looked at his mother, then at the pen. He could not hear the name Child Protective Services, but he saw his mother's face change when Harrison spoke. He tugged gently on her sleeve and sighed, "I'm okay." Elena looked down at her son, and that all broke her. Malik had just been locked in the dark for 2 hours, his hand still scratched, his ear still red, his only hearing device destroyed. And yet he was trying to comfort her, as if his greatest fear was not the storage room, but becoming the final burden that crushed his mother. Harrison pushed the pen a little closer. He said signing here did not mean admitting failure, only taking the first step so Malik could receive the right support. Elena picked up the pen. Her fingernails still had packing tape marks from work. She signed her name on the parent line, the first stroke crooked because her hand was shaking. One tear fell onto the paper, blurring the ink in the letter E. She wiped it away at once with the back of her hand, as if even her tears could be used against her. Malik looked at the blurred ink. He slowly raised both hands. The first motion was clumsy because his joints hurt. He signed, sorry. Pause, Mom. Elena dropped the pen, pulled his hands down, and kissed his scratched fingers. She spoke so he could read her lips. "You don't apologize for being hurt," but Malik kept looking at the paper, his eyes wet, as if his mother's signature were a wound he had caused. Harrison took the folder back. He said the school would send a copy by email. He also recommended that Elena keep Malik home for a few days so he could calm down and think about his behavior. When Elena asked for written confirmation that the cameras were under maintenance, Harrison promised that his assistant would provide it once the system completed its technical check. Elena stood and put Malik's coat on him. Trent still sat quietly, but when Elena bent to pick up her son's bag, she saw him look at Malik and smirk very quickly. Just a flash. Quick enough for adults to miss, but clear enough for a bullied child to understand that if he came back tomorrow, the story would not be over. Malik looked down at the floor. He held the broken hearing aid close to his chest. The school hallway was empty now. A cheer squad passed at the far end, their shoes and laughter echoing under the high ceiling. Malik could not hear it clearly, but he felt the vibration through the floor. Elena held his hand and walked past the Student of the Month photo board, past the anti-bullying poster showing colorful hands holding one another. She stopped at the nurse's office to get Malik's backpack. The nurse avoided her eyes when she handed over the bag, then slipped a small pack of bandages into the outside pocket. Outside, a fine rain covered the parking lot like silver dust. Elena pulled Malik's hood up, then realized he could no longer hear reversing cars, closing doors, or people calling from behind. She changed positions, keeping herself on the traffic side, her hand gripping his tightly. Malik walked with his head down, his old shoes darkened by water. Now and then he touched his pocket to make sure the broken hearing aid was still there. Inside the black SUV parked beyond the row of maple trees, Nathaniel watched mother and son through the tinted glass. He had stayed after the tour to take a call with the foundation board from the car, but when he saw Elena run into the school through the side entrance, he told the driver not to leave. Now he saw the boy who had shared half a sandwich with Lily walking out with his shoulders drawn in, holding something in his pocket like a bird with a broken wing. He saw the mother bending her body to shield her son from the rain, even though her own coat was already wet from shoulder to back. Nathaniel was not a man easily moved by scenes of hardship. Childhood had taught him that pity did not stop fists, and money placed in the wrong hands only taught bad people how to speak more beautifully. But he remembered very clearly the moment Lily stopped shaking in the cafeteria because half a sandwich was offered without words. Some debts do not appear in accounting books. Some small acts are enough to define a child more clearly than any fake behavior file. Elena opened the door of the old Toyota and helped Malik into the back seat. She wiped his face with a tissue, then checked the messages from the warehouse on her phone. Her manager had already texted that her attendance points had been reduced and next week's shifts might be adjusted. Elena looked at the screen, turned it off, and sat behind the wheel for a few seconds before starting the car. She rested her forehead on the steering wheel for one short beat. Malik leaned forward from the back seat and touched her shoulder. He signed slowly through the mirror, "I'm okay." In that moment, Nathaniel's power no longer felt like money. It felt like a key that had been in the wrong pocket for too long, finally finding the door it was meant to open. He did not know what would happen to Malik after this day, but he knew that a child who had been locked in the dark should not remain locked inside a false file too. Nathaniel watched the sign, then lifted his phone. He did not call Harrison. He did not call the school board. He called Mira directly, the cybersecurity director of his company, the woman who had designed the cloud storage system Westbridge used with his funding. When she answered, he asked one short question: whether the school camera recordings were backed up before local administrators could delete them. Mira said yes if the security package had not been disabled through high-level access. Nathaniel watched the Toyota leave the parking lot, its red taillights blurring in the rain. He told Mira he wanted all Westbridge camera data from the last 24 hours recovered, including login logs, deletion commands, administrator access, and temporary copies. Mira was quiet for a few seconds, then asked if he needed permission from the school. Nathaniel looked at the building where a slogan about safety for every student hung behind the glass doors. He said the servers belonged to his company's contract, and if someone had used that system to hide violence against a child, he wanted to know before they had time to wipe their fingerprints clean. He paused, his eyes still following the road where Elena's car had disappeared. Then he said the final sentence in a voice so low that even the driver did not turn his head. "Recover everything they deleted in the last 24 hours. I want to know who dared to step on my daughter's savior." Elena did not go to work the next morning. The alarm rang at 4:20 like it did every day, but instead of putting on her reflective vest and tying up her hair in time for the packing shift, she sat on the edge of the bed and looked at the suspension notice on the kitchen table. Her phone showed an automatic message from the warehouse: unpaid absence, attendance points reduced, and next week's schedule under review. The one-bedroom apartment she shared with Malik was on the 3rd floor of an old building in the south end. The radiator clicked every time the wind slipped through the window. Malik set the kitchen table in a blue hoodie, both hands resting on his knees. Elena made oatmeal with the last of the milk. She pushed the bowl toward her son, then turned to open the kitchen cabinet so Malik would not see that she was only pouring black coffee for herself. Malik looked at his mother's reflection in the microwave door. Elena turned back, saw the shared portion, and smiled. She signed slowly to him that she had already eaten. Malik looked at her for a little longer, then shook his head and pushed the bowl a few more inches toward her. She sat down. Mother and son ate from the same bowl. Malik chewed very slowly, sometimes touching the pocket where he kept the broken hearing aid. After breakfast, Elena spread a towel on the table and placed the pieces of the device on it like a poor doctor preparing for surgery. She took out glue, clear tape, an old hair clip, and a tiny screwdriver from her sewing box. Malik sat beside her, his eyes never leaving her hands. Elena knew she could not fix it. But she still had to try, because trying felt better than sitting there doing nothing while her son was pushed back into a silent world. She placed one drop of glue along the crack and held it down with her thumb. The glue stuck to her skin. Malik immediately pulled a paper towel toward her. He signed one short sentence. "Does it hurt, Mom?" Elena shook her head, but her fingernail had already turned white with glue. On the third try, the battery fit into the slot, but the device only gave a tiny static sound and died again. Malik put it on and looked at his mother, waiting. Elena tapped lightly on the table to create a vibration. Malik looked at the tabletop, then at her, and shook his head. He took the hearing aid off and carefully placed it back down, as if he were afraid of making his mother even sadder. Elena turned to the sink and ran water over her hands. When she turned back, she signs to Malik that she would find a way. He nodded right away, too quickly, like a child believing an adult's promise. Across the city, the 38th floor of the glass building bearing the Armitage Data Company logo had been lit since before 6 a.m. Nathaniel stood inside the cybersecurity room with his coat still on. Across the wall of screens were Westbridge's storage system map, camera points, access logs, and a blue timeline. Mira, the cybersecurity director, sat with 4 engineers. Mira opened the cold backup from the original server. The cloud system kept video fragments for 30 days before overwriting them completely. One engineer recovered the gym footage while another pulled the storage room door logs from the security sensors. Nathaniel did not say much. He stood behind them with both hands in his pockets, watching each frame come back to life. The first clip appeared with slightly broken edges, but it was clear enough. Malik stood near the end of the line during PE. Trent stepped closer and snapped his fingers beside Malik's ear. Another child laughed. Nathaniel saw Malik stop. Then Trent snatched the hearing aid and threw it onto the floor. The battery rolled away. Malik dropped to his knees. Nathaniel placed a hand on the back of the chair in front of him. Mira did not turn to look at him. The video continued. Trent pushed Malik toward the storage room door. Another boy stood in the teacher's line of sight, and then the door closed. The sensor log showed the latch being locked from the outside at 2:17. It opened again at 4:19 with the janitor's staff card. 2 hours and 2 minutes. Nathaniel asked them to play that part again. Mira marked the frame, saved a verified copy, then opened the second clip. The school server room camera around midnight. Harrison stepped inside alone, without his suit jacket, holding his phone. He logged into the control panel, selected the gym and side hallway cameras, and deleted the footage from 2 to 4:30. The screen reflected in the glass clearly showed the account and the time of the action. Nathaniel watched Harrison bend over the server, his face lit by the blue glow of the screen. Nathaniel turned to Mira and told her to package everything. Video, access logs, sensor data, deletion records, and the administrator permission report. Mira asked if she should send it to the school board right away. Nathaniel did not answer yet. He wanted them to lie one more time in front of the right person. That afternoon, Elena received a shut-off notice saying the electricity would be cut unless she paid at least $96 by Friday. She placed the paper on the table beside the suspension notice, then opened her banking app. The balance was enough for a little food and bus fare, not enough to hold everything together at once. Malik sat on the rug, drawing with dull-colored pencils. He drew the cafeteria, a little girl holding half a sandwich, and beside her, a picture of his mother with very large hands covering the space above his head. Elena looked at the drawing, then turned toward the laundry basket so he would not see her eyes turn red. The knock came close to 5 o'clock. Elena stood up immediately, because in this building, no one knocked at that hour unless it was the landlord or someone collecting a bill. She looked through the peephole. A tall white man stood in the hallway, wearing a simple dark coat and no tie. He held a paper bag and an envelope. His face was familiar in the way of someone she had seen on school funding news, but not closely enough to name. Elena opened the door with the chain still on. The man introduced himself as Nathan, a representative of a community support fund working with families whose children needed hearing devices. He did not say his last name. He also did not talk about his corporation shares or the server room. He spoke very slowly, his eyes on Elena instead of trying to look over her shoulder into the apartment. The way he kept his distance made her less ready to close the door right away. Elena asked who had given him her address. Nathaniel handed her a printed sheet about the program saying Westbridge had forwarded an emergency support list after the device incident. It was not a complete lie. His legal team had used his donor rights to request the list of parents affected by damaged devices. But Elena did not know that. She looked at the small logo on the paper, then at his shoes. People like him did not usually stand in her hallway unless they wanted something. Malik appeared behind his mother holding his old teddy bear. Nathaniel lowered his head and greeted him with clumsy ASL. "Hello." Malik blinked, then looked at his mother as if asking whether this stranger was truly safe. Hearing adults rarely signed to him first. Elena removed the chain but still stood blocking half the door. Nathaniel set the paper bag on the small table in the hallway and opened it to show a new behind-the-ear hearing aid kit with batteries, a soft ear mold, and a free-fitting appointment at a partner clinic. Malik looked at the box but did not step forward. He looked at his mother first. Elena did not reach for it. She asked where the paperwork was, what the conditions were, who was paying, whether it was a loan, and whether it would affect her son's insurance. Nathaniel listened to every question, and for one very small moment the corner of his mouth softened. He had met many people in fundraising rooms who accepted six-figure gifts with fewer questions. The woman before him was standing in an apartment with a red electricity notice on the fridge and a son who could not hear. Yet her first response was not thank you. She wanted to know if the gift could become a trap. He handed her the envelope. Inside was a confirmation letter for non-repayable device support, the appointment schedule, the phone number of an independent legal office, and a clause stating that the family did not have to participate in promotion, photos, or testimonials. Elena read slowly. She turned to the second page and checked the fine print. Malik stood on his toes, looking at the device box, his hands twisting together because he was trying not to ask. Nathaniel saw that and turned his face toward the hallway wall. He did not want the boy to see his own kindness being turned into pity. Elena finally opened the door wider. She invited him in but did not apologize for the small apartment. Nathaniel stepped inside and immediately noticed the smell of cold oatmeal, glue, and clothes drying indoors. Malik sat by the table while his mother kept reading the papers. Nathaniel placed the device box in front of him. He used a few simple signs in a slightly wrong order. This for you if Mom agrees. Malik looked at his mother, then at him and gave a small smile, but he still did not touch the box. Elena asked why. The question was not polite, but it was honest. Nathaniel looked at the drawing on the floor and saw the half-sandwich colored pale yellow. He said someone had told the fund that Malik needed help. Elena heard that answer and knew a part of it was missing. She had lived long enough to recognize when a person with power was holding back information. But in his eyes, there was no hunger for a story, no phone recording secretly, only a controlled coldness like someone waiting for the right time to open another door. Before leaving, Nathaniel stopped at the door. He said the school board had a budget meeting at 9 o'clock the next morning. Harrison would be asking for approval of a new funding package. Elena immediately shook her head. She did not want to go back there to be humiliated again, did not want Malik to walk past Trent in the hallway, and did not want to sit in front of that walnut desk with a pen already waiting. Nathaniel did not push. He only placed a business card on the table without a corporate title. He said if she brought Malik there, justice would be present. Elena looked at the card, only the name Nathan and a direct phone number, no last name, no logo. But the paper was thick, and the ink rose slightly under her fingertips. Malik touched the device box, then signed with questioning hands to his mother. Go back to school tomorrow? Elena wrapped an arm around his shoulders and did not answer right away. That night, after Malik fell asleep, Elena sat at the kitchen table and read every page of the support documents again. She called the independent legal number inside the envelope and heard the voicemail confirm the organization's name. She checked the clinic address. Then she looked at the suspension notice, the electric bill, and the new hearing aid still sealed in the box. Some gifts are so large that they make poor people more afraid than happy. But some doors, if you do not walk through them, will leave your child trapped inside a story someone else wrote for him. The next morning, Elena wore the only black dress she owned that had not faded, combed Malik's hair neatly, and put the new hearing aid into her bag instead of letting him wear it right away. She wanted everything vetted by a doctor with the correct paperwork, leaving Harrison no excuse to say she had accepted something from an unclear source. Malik wore a light blue shirt and held the drawing folder with the half sandwich inside. Mother and son took 2 buses in the rain and arrived at the Westbridge gate at 8:54. In the boardroom, Harrison stood in front of the presentation screen in a navy suit, wearing his fundraiser smile at the perfect warmth. He told the board members that Westbridge always protected vulnerable children and always handled behavior with compassion and balanced discipline. Those words passed through a room with thick carpet, hot coffee, and small pastries arranged on a silver tray. The oak door opened. Elena stepped in, holding Malik's hand. The conversation stopped like a projector needle caught on a frame. Harrison turned, his eyes sharpening for a split second before the smile returned. He said this meeting was not for parents, then asked his assistant to call security. Malik stood close to his mother, looking at the faces turning toward him. Elena squeezed his hand but did not step back. The assistant had just touched the phone when a voice came from the corner of the room near the window where the morning light did not fully reach. Nathaniel stood from the leather chair at the end of the table. This time, he wore a dark gray suit, and beside him were Mira with a laptop and one of the company lawyers. Harrison whipped around, his fundraising face disappearing for half a second. Nathaniel stepped out of the shadow, looking directly at Elena and Malik instead of Harrison. He placed a thin folder on the table. His voice was not loud, but the room immediately obeyed it. He said, "Let them stay. I'm the one who invited her here." Harrison opened his mouth to interrupt, but Nathaniel had already pulled out the chair facing the screen for Elena and then signaled for the assistant not to touch the phone again. Nathaniel pulled the chair out for Elena, then stood still until she and Malik sat down. Harrison was still standing in front of the screen, speaking about the $5 million funding package, the new computer room, and the commitment to protecting every student. Now he stood beside the presentation stand with the remote still in his hand, his fundraiser smile stuck on his face. Elena sat on the edge of the chair, one hand resting on Malik's shoulder. The boy held his drawing folder against his chest, his eyes moving between the unfamiliar faces around the table. The new hearing aid was still in his mother's cloth bag, not yet fitted. He could not hear the board members whispering clearly, but he could read the way their mouths closed when Nathaniel stepped out from the corner of the room. Harrison found his voice first. He gave a light laugh and turned toward Nathaniel as if handling a polite misunderstanding. He said Elena was a parent who had become emotional after an unfortunate incident and that the school had the right support process in place. He used soft phrases, student confidentiality, the sensitivity of the situation, the privacy rights of minors. Nathaniel did not look at him. He opened the folder in front of him, took out a small black hard drive and placed it beside Mira's laptop. Mira connected the device to the projection system. The company lawyer handed each board member an evidence preservation notice requiring that no one leave the room, no one delete emails, and no one use a phone except for legal communication. Harrison frowned. He said if this were a funding matter, it should be discussed privately with the district office. Only then did Nathaniel turn to him. He said that before signing a check, he wanted to know whether the school was using his money to protect students or to hide the fact that the principal's son had locked a deaf child inside a storage room. The sentence fell into the boardroom like a heavy object. Elena tightened her hand on Malik's shoulder by reflex. Harrison opened his mouth, but Nathaniel had already nodded to Mira. The giant screen lit up. The first video appeared with a timestamp in the corner. Westbridge Gym, 2:11 p.m. The image was clear enough to show Malik standing at the end of the line, his hand touching the old hearing aid in his left ear. In the video, Trent stepped up behind him. Another child looked toward the PE teacher to keep watch. Trent snapped his fingers beside Malik's ear. Malik, startled, turned around and signed stop. Elena did not blink. Watching her son being hunted on the screen made her knees go numb under the table. The video continued. Trent snatched the hearing aid from Malik's ear. The device fell to the floor. The battery popped out and rolled under the folded chairs. Malik dropped to his knees, both hands rushing to pick up the pieces. Trent bent down and said something very close to his face, his mouth moving slowly, exaggerating every word. Mira zoomed in on the frame and muted the background sound. Nathaniel did not need to read lips. Those words made Elena's hand tighten on her son's shoulder. Dumb, deaf mute. One board member turned away. Harrison immediately stepped forward half a step and said that children could behave without thinking, and that this clip did not show the full context. Nathaniel raised one finger. The video kept playing. Trent grabbed Malik's shirt and pushed him toward the equipment storage room. The metal door opened. Malik tried to hold the door frame, but another boy knocked his hand down. Trent pushed him inside, closed the door, then slid the latch from the outside. The timestamp kept running, 2:17. Mira fast-forwarded through the hallway outside the storage room. Children left the gym. The PE teacher passed by once, but was called away by another student. No one opened the door. The timestamp jumped in blocks, from 2:31 to 3:08, then to 3:47. Finally, at 4:19, Raymond the janitor opened the door. Malik appeared in the dark corner, curled between the mats. When the light poured in, he backed away like a small animal caught in a beam. Elena lifted a hand to her mouth. Malik looked at the screen, but he did not cry. He stared at the image of himself in the dark with very round eyes, as if trying to understand why his private fear was now sitting in front of so many adults. Nathaniel stepped to the side of the table and partly blocked Malik's view of Harrison, enough so the boy would not have to see the principal's face while watching it again. Harrison wiped his forehead with a handkerchief. He said the video was heartbreaking, but everyone had to remember that these were children playing too roughly. He mentioned recovery, educational discipline, and the fact that Trent had also been hurt. He raised the hand that had appeared bandaged in his son's file, even though Trent was not in the room. Nathaniel did not answer with emotion, signaled for Mira to open the second file. The screen switched to the school server room camera at 12:43 a.m. Harrison walked in alone without his suit jacket, his shirt collar unbuttoned. He swiped his card, looked around, and then sat at the control panel. Mira zoomed in on the computer screen reflected in the network cabinet glass. The administrator account showed Harrison's name. The gym camera and side hallway folders were selected. A delete confirmation box opened. The mouse cursor paused for 2 seconds, then clicked confirm. The room changed sound. No one shouted. But the air conditioner, the sound of pens being set down, and the soft movement of chairs suddenly became clearer. Harrison stared at the screen, color draining from his face so quickly that the powder on his forehead could not hide it. He stammered that this could be data maintenance, a technical action requested by the IT department. Mira switched to the access log. There was only a login under the principal's account, manual deletion of 4 camera files, and then an attempt to erase the local log at 12:51. Nathaniel placed the documents on the table. He said they contained the recovery report from the original server, electronic signatures, verification codes, and a comparison between Malik's suspension notice and the exact time Harrison deleted the video. He looked directly at the principal for a few seconds longer. Covering up violence, destroying evidence, fabricating a suspension record, and threatening a parent with administrative power were no longer management mistakes. Harrison gripped the edge of the presentation stand. He tried to shift into a bargaining voice, calling Nathaniel by his first name, bringing up 12 years of service, awards, and the families the school had helped. Nathaniel's expression did not change. He said, "The children the school had helped were not a shield Harrison could use to hide a child locked in a dark storage room." Then he turned to the school board chair and demanded Harrison's immediate suspension, preservation of all student records connected to bullying cases from the last 3 years, and notification to the district, the police, and the State Education Oversight Office. The board chair, Mrs. Caldwell, looked at her lawyer. She took off her reading glasses, placed them on the folder, and announced that the board was suspending Harrison immediately pending investigation. Her voice was rough, and for the first time since Elena had entered, someone inside the system said a sentence without dancing around it. Harrison turned toward her and whispered that she was making a serious mistake. Nathaniel signaled to the lawyer. The boardroom door opened. 2 police officers entered with a district investigator. They walked in steadily, carrying a temporary detention order and a request to seize electronic devices. Harrison stepped back once, then remembered he was standing before the board and straightened himself. One officer read him his rights. Harrison tried to say this was a misunderstanding, that he had only wanted to protect the school's reputation, that Nathaniel was using money to destroy him. Nathaniel stepped closer. He said Harrison had suspended a child who could not defend himself, not because the boy was dangerous, but because the boy was the most convenient witness to bend. He had taken away Malik's right to speak, then tried to erase the image of him from the system. That was not protecting a school. That was turning a school into a place where the vulnerable were punished for existing. The officer handcuffed Harrison. The sound of metal closing made Malik flinch slightly. Elena immediately blocked her son's view with her shoulder. Harrison looked around the room, searching for someone who would say, "Wait, this can be handled quietly inside the school." But everyone in the room could see the empty principal's chair in front of the screen, still frozen on the frame of Harrison clicking delete. Before being let out, Harrison tried to tell Nathaniel that the $5 million funding package would collapse if this scandal broke. The school would lose the computer room, the scholarship program, and its reputation. Nathaniel tilted his head as if he had finally heard what the man was truly afraid of. He said money meant nothing if it was used to polish a place that locked children in the dark. From this moment on, every dollar of funding would be frozen until there was independent oversight, a new disciplinary board, and a public report on every bullying case that had been mishandled. Harrison was taken through the door. He could no longer hold the false moral smile. His collar was crooked, the hair on his forehead was damp with sweat, and his eyes moved across each person as if he was memorizing who had betrayed him. At the doorway, he turned and looked at Elena. It was not regret. That look was still trying to place the blame on the mother who had dared to stand in the room. This time, Elena held his gaze. Her hand on Malik's shoulder was no longer shaking the way it had when she signed the suspension notice. The door closed. In the boardroom, the screen was still lit. The timestamp on the gym video sat frozen at the moment Malik disappeared behind the storage room door. A few board members lowered their eyes to the papers, not to read, but to avoid looking at Elena. Harrison's assistant stood near the door, pale, holding her notebook against her chest. Malik tugged at his mother's sleeve. He signed very slowly because he was still looking at the adults around him. "Mom, did I do something wrong?" Elena bent down at once and held her son's face in both hands. She signed each word back, clear enough that even people who did not know ASL could understand something sacred was happening. "You did nothing wrong. Not even a little." Malik looked at her, pressed his lips together, then nodded. He placed a hand over the pocket where the new hearing aid sat, but he still did not take it out. Nathaniel watched that moment, and the coldness on his face cracked very slightly. Lily had once asked him why adults could do wrong things and still wear nice suits to school. He had not known how to answer. A principal in handcuffs could not erase 2 hours in the dark. A recovered video could not immediately heal the scratches on Malik's hands. But it gave the boy back the first thing cruel people always try to take, the right to trust his own memory. Mrs. Caldwell stood. She turned toward Elena and said the board would cancel Malik's suspension immediately and send an official written apology. Elena looked at her. Official words had turned her son into an attacker. Now the official apology sounded more correct, but still too small beside a door locked for 2 hours. She nodded once, but did not thank her. Nathaniel signaled for Mira to turn off the video. The screen went dark, leaving the whole room reflected in the black glass. He walked toward Elena and Malik but did not stand too close. Everyone in the room knew who he was, the founder of the Data Corporation, the largest donor, the man who could pull a check from this school with one signature. But Nathaniel did not look at the board first. He looked at Malik. He lowered his head slightly, then used both hands to sign what he had practiced again the night before. "Thank you." Malik blinked. Nathaniel signed again, slowly and a little incorrectly. "Half sandwich. Lily. Brave." Malik looked at his hands, then at his mother to make sure he understood. Elena swallowed and nodded to her son. The room waited for Nathaniel to announce something. Some thought he would leave. Some thought he would cancel the funding immediately. Harrison had been taken away, but the silence left behind in the room was heavier than when he had stood there. Nathaniel turned to the board, placed his hand on the thin folder in front of him, and said calmly that the hardest part had not begun yet, because punishing one man was easier than fixing the whole environment that had allowed him to lie without being questioned. Elena sat up straighter. Malik still held his mother's hand. The board members watched Nathaniel, waiting for judgment. Outside the glass door, the school hallway had started ringing with the sound of the class change bell, in front of people who no longer had the right to pretend. Nathaniel didn't say more right away. He let the waiting stretch long enough for every person in the room to look again at Harrison's empty chair, the screen that had just gone black, the mother in the old black dress, and the boy holding a drawing folder. Then he opened the leather briefcase beside him and took out a large envelope stamped with the Armitage Family Foundation seal. Inside was not only a check, there was also a 6-page list of conditions. He placed the envelope in the middle of the table and pushed it toward Mrs. Caldwell. But before anyone could open it, Nathaniel looked at Malik one more time, as if he wanted the boy to know there was now a promise that this harm would not be buried under paperwork again. Nathaniel hadn't opened the envelope yet. He left his chair, walked around the head of the table, and knelt on one knee in front of Malik. The movement made the whole boardroom freeze. The man who had just caused a principal to be handcuffed now placed himself at eye level with an 8-year-old boy holding a drawing folder. Malik looked at his mother first. Elena nodded, but her hand stayed on her son's back. Nathaniel slowly lifted both hands. His signs were not smooth yet, and some movements were a little stiff because he had learned them quickly through videos during the night, but every word was made carefully. He signed, "Thank you. Half a sandwich. Lily, bravest one here." Malik blinked several times. He looked at Nathaniel's lips, then at his hands, then at Elena, to make sure he had not misunderstood. Elena lifted a hand to her mouth, but this time she was not covering her tears because she was afraid of being judged. She signed it again more clearly for her son. "He is thanking you for helping Lily." Malik turned back to Nathaniel. His face, which had been tightened since the storage room and the principal's office, suddenly opened with a small smile. Then he stepped forward and hugged Nathaniel's neck very quickly, like a child afraid that if he moved any slower, his courage would slip away. Nathaniel stayed still in that hug longer than anyone expected. He did not pat Malik's back like someone posing for a charity photo. He only placed one hand lightly on the boy's shoulder and lowered his eyes to the floor, so no one in the room could mistake that moment for a performance. When Malik stepped back, Nathaniel took a small card from his coat pocket. On it was the name of an audiology clinic, an appointment for that afternoon, and a note saying Malik's new device would be fitted by a specialist. Elena accepted the card with both hands. She read every line carefully. The habit of suspicion did not disappear just because Harrison had been led away. Poor people learn to check every gift because a gift can turn into a debt. Nathaniel waited. He did not rush her. When Elena looked up, he said the support was not cash, not pity, and did not require her to appear in any foundation news story. It was what the system should have done for a child it had abandoned. Then Nathaniel stood and turned back to the board table. Mrs. Caldwell had opened the envelope. Inside was the $5 million check and a 6-page list of conditions. The board members leaned down to read, their faces changing line by line. The funding would only be released if Westbridge created an independent school violence oversight board, hired standing ASL interpreters under contract, released a report on every discipline case involving disabled students over the last 3 years, and moved bullying investigations out of the principal's office to an outside team. Nathaniel placed a hand on the back of a chair. He said the check was still valid, but the school would not be allowed to use a single dollar to repair its image before repairing how it operated. Malik would receive a full lifetime scholarship at any school that fit him best, from elementary school through college. The scholarship did not force Elena to sign a silence agreement, did not require photos, and did not force Malik to return to Westbridge. A board lawyer started to ask about media liability limits. Nathaniel looked at him long enough for the question to die in his throat. He said privacy belonged to Malik and his mother. Reputation belonged to the truth. If the board wanted to protect the school's name, it could start by protecting children instead of protecting the principal's chair. Elena heard the words lifetime scholarship, but she did not stand right away. She looked at Malik, then at the cloth bag holding the new hearing aid. In her mind, the familiar numbers began running on their own. Rent, electric bill, bus fare, lunch, batteries, shoes, and unpaid days off. But a scholarship was such a large future that she did not know where to put her hands. She only bent down and fixed Malik's collar, a small action to keep herself from breaking apart in front of all the people who had let her son be written into a problem. Mrs. Caldwell stood and said the board accepted the initial conditions and would call a special session for a formal vote that day. Nathaniel did not smile. He asked the minutes to state clearly that Malik's record would be restored immediately, that every disciplinary note tied to the suspended incident had to be withdrawn, and that the apology letter to Elena could not be written in softened language, not incident, not misunderstanding. It had to say school violence, evidence cover-up, and wrongful discipline. Elena looked at Mrs. Caldwell. "I want my son not to have to walk past Trent in the hallway again," she said, her voice low but clear. It was the first sentence she had spoken in that room without asking anyone's permission. Mrs. Caldwell nodded and wrote it down. Nathaniel added that Trent would be suspended immediately, his behavior would be evaluated by an outside unit, and if the investigation confirmed a pattern of intentional bullying, the file would be transferred to a juvenile intervention program. No one used the words kids playing around anymore. That afternoon, Elena took Malik to the audiology clinic. Nathaniel did not go with them, so he would not turn it into his event. He sent a black community coordinator named Marcia, a woman who spoke to Elena like a mother with the right to decide. The doctor checked Malik's ear, measured the mold, and fitted the new device. When the first sound was turned on, Malik flinched because the rustle of the exam paper was suddenly so clear. Elena covered her mouth, laughing and crying at the same time. Malik touched the new hearing aid, then looked at his mother. He signed, "I can hear you breathing." Elena turned toward the window and wiped her eyes with her sleeve. For months, she had feared the old device would break completely before she could save enough money. Now her son could hear again, but what softened her was not the expensive device. It was the way the doctor asked Malik if he wanted the volume raised, waited for him to nod, and only then adjusted it. An adult had asked him first before touching his world. 1 week later, Elena returned to the warehouse to ask for a shift change, but the manager said her attendance score had already affected her schedule. She left the building with a thin payroll envelope in her hand. In the parking lot, Marcia called. Nathaniel's company was hiring an internal library assistant for the Community Learning Center, with flexible hours, full insurance, and permission to bring her child to the reading area after school. Elena went to the interview with her warehouse work record, her unfinished community college certificate, and the list of days she needed to take Malik to therapy. She did not ask for special treatment. She made it clear that she needed a real job. The interviewers did not question her like a charity case. They asked how she had managed night shifts, how she handled pressure, and whether she had experience organizing documents and helping children read. Elena answered each question with the voice of someone who had kept an entire family standing through work schedules and tape. She was hired 3 days later. When she signed the contract, she read every term carefully. Murph sat beside her, waiting for every question, never rushing her. Harrison did not return to Westbridge. The investigation confirmed that he had deleted data, falsified disciplinary records, and threatened a parent. He lost his education license and was charged with obstruction of investigation and destruction of evidence. The trial did not happen right away. The law in America is rarely as clean and fast as it is in movies. But every time Elena received an update from the prosecutor's office, she placed it in a separate folder so Malik would know the adults were still chasing the truth, even after the cameras were turned off. Trent was moved out of Westbridge into a behavior intervention program supervised by the school district. Elena did not celebrate that. He was still a child raised in a house that had taught him power could wipe away guilt. But she also did not let pity make her forget her own son. When Malik asked if Trent would be locked in a dark room, Elena told him clearly that no one should be locked in the dark, but anyone who hurts others has to learn how to take responsibility in the light. 3 months later, Malik started at a new school with a part-time ASL support teacher and a quiet room for students who were sensitive to sound. On his first day, he wore his new hearing aid and a new backpack and carried the old drawing folder with the picture of the half sandwich. Elena stood outside the gate longer than she needed to. Malik turned back and told her she could go to work. He did not say it with his mouth, but his smile was steady enough for Elena to step back. In class, a little boy asked if the device on Malik's ear was a robot ear. Malik looked at the teacher. The teacher did not answer for him. She only stood close, letting him know he had a way out. Malik took a small board and wrote, "It helps me hear better." The other child nodded, then asked if he liked dinosaurs. At lunch, Malik sat at a shared table. When a little girl dropped her box of grapes, he bent down to help pick them up, but this time no one laughed. Lily met Malik again at the opening of the new Community Learning Center. There was no major press, only parents, teachers, a few students, and a small sign with the name of the Independent Oversight Program. Lily handed Malik a muffin that had already been cut in half. Malik smiled and signed, "Thank you." Nathaniel stood beside the door, watching the two children exchange the simple language of people who had once feared crowded rooms but still chose kindness. Elena stood at the children's book counter, wearing an employee name tag, her hand straightening a stack of comic books. That night, Malik placed his hearing aid on the nightstand like something precious. Elena sat on the edge of his bed, read one page of a story, then signed the final part so he would not miss anything. Malik touched his mother's wrist and signed that he was not afraid of the cafeteria anymore. Elena bent down and kissed his forehead, holding her lips there one beat longer. I think there are stories we remember not because of the biggest revenge, but because of the moment a child is finally believed. Harrison represented the most frightening kind of power. No need to shout, no need to hit, only files, rules, and titles used to turn the victim into the problem. One wrong signature can make a poor mother stay silent. One sentence about camera maintenance can bury the whole truth under the clean carpet of a prestigious school. But Malik also reminds us that kindness does not need a voice box to be heard. He could not stand in the boardroom and defend himself with long sentences. He only had his hands half a sandwich and the instinct to recognize another child in fear. Yet that small act traveled farther than any fundraising speech. It reached Lily. It reached Nathaniel, and in the end it pulled a hidden system into the light. As for Nathaniel, he was not kind, soft, or weak. He was kinda sharp. He didn't come to hold the camera, hand out money at the door, or ask people to clap for him. He gathered evidence, protected records, placed conditions in writing, and forced the powerful man to pay with the very things he had once used to press others down: process, signatures, and rules. That is a form of justice that vulnerable people often cannot reach alone. So I want to ask you something. When facing an unfair system that emphasizes social status, is a polite and civilized solution always strong enough to protect vulnerable people? Or sometimes, to save a child trapped in the dark? Does justice also have to learn how to become sharper than the people manipulating the rules of the game? If you believe kindness needs courage with it, leave the phrase justice in the comments below. Your support helps us keep telling the stories hidden behind doors that look so clean from the outside. It is late now. Somewhere Malik is probably sleeping with his new hearing aid placed carefully on the nightstand. The last sound he heard today is no longer the click of a lock closing, but his mother Elena whispering good night. There are still dark rooms in this world, but tonight one kind boy is safe. I'll see you in the next story.